For the most part, we all grew up watching Disney classics, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, Snow White, The Little Mermaid. However, did you know these stories are based on books, usually books that are tragic and disturbing, and in no way are made for children? Shocking, I know. So today on Top 5 Scary Videos, I'm going to be counting down our list of the top 5 scary real stories behind Disney movies. Before we begin though, be sure to stick around until the end of the video where I'll be responding to some of your comments. And with that, let's jump in. Coming in at number 5, Cinderella. Cinderella is a movie from the 1950s that we all grew up watching and loving. Its story followed Cinderella, a woman who has a dream of attending the royal ball so she can meet the Grand Duke. However, her dream is hindered by her evil stepmother, but luckily for Cinderella, she gets her own help from her fairy godmother. However, in the Brothers Grimm version of the story, Cinderella takes on a much darker tone, and I mean much darker. In the section of the story where the evil stepsisters try on shoes to prove to the prince that they should marry them, one of the sisters cuts off her toes and the other her heel so that they can both fit into the tiny glass slipper. The prince is then notified by doves that there is blood on the shoe and ultimately discovers that the true owner is Cinderella. So sweet. So once the stepsisters realize that they should try to win over Cinderella, they attend the wedding, only to have their eyes pecked out by birds. Disturbing, right? Well, it doesn't end there. In the story, Cinderella doesn't have a fairy godmother. Rather, she plants a tree by the grave of her mother and prays under it every single day. She then finds her dresses to wear to each ball under the tree. She is still helped by animals, specifically birds. Also, she doesn't lose her shoe because she is in a rush, but instead the prince covers the step in black tar to make her stick to them, but she only loses the one shoe in the process. The entire thing is screwed up. I know, princes suck. Coming in at number 4, Pinocchio. Yet another Disney classic we all grew up loving and watching. Pinocchio was released in 1940 and followed a marionette who must earn the right to become human by proving his truthfulness, bravery, and unselfishness. A cricket, Jiminy, constantly assists him as his conscience along the way. The movie is based on a story that appeared as a serial in a newspaper called The Adventures of Pinocchio, written in 1881 and 1882 by Carlo Collodi. In the story, Jiminy Cricket appears as the talking cricket in the book and does not play as prominent of a role. He actually first appears in chapter 4. I quote, "At these last words, Pinocchio jumped up in a fury, took a hammer from the bench and threw all his strength at the talking cricket. Perhaps he did not think he would strike it, but sad to relate, my dear children, he did hit the cricket straight on the head. With a last weak crick, the poor cricket fell from the wall dead." However, don't fret too much. Pinocchio eventually learned his lesson, or seemed to. While he didn't feel bad about killing the cricket, he did seem to regret not taking the cricket's advice as he runs into more and more trouble along the way. Pinocchio is constantly tortured in different ways throughout the story, all punishment for bad behavior. Collodi initially ended the story with Pinocchio's death by hanging, but because of the outcry from fans, Collodi was forced to continue. So instead, he spared his life in exchange for even more gruesome punishments from that point on. I mean, that's what you get for killing Jiminy Cricket. Coming in at number 3, Snow White. Let's keep going with these classics, shall we? Released in 1937, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Snow White, a princess, is exiled by her stepmother, an evil queen who wants to kill her. So she runs into a forest and is eventually rescued by 7 dwarfs who form a friendship with her. However, it turns out Walt Disney left out some rather gruesome details in the animated movie. The movie is of course based on the original story by German Brothers Grimm, and the story is a lot more grim indeed. Despite the book's title, it was actually never intended for children, with the original text including violence, incest, and lots of sex. Now in the original text, which was actually called Little Snow White, the evil queen asks a hunter to take Snow White into the forest to kill her. However, in the original version, she was just 7 years old at the time. In the Grimm version, the queen orders the huntsman to bring back Snow White's internal organs, saying, "Kill her, and as proof that she is dead, bring her lungs and liver back to me." So instead he kills a boar and brings back to the queen the boar's lungs and liver, which the queen thinks belongs to Snow White and then eats them. I quote, "The cook had to boil them with salt and the wicked woman ate them, supposing that she had eaten Snow White's lungs and liver." Now to make matters worse, Snow White is also already dead by the time the prince finds her, but he falls in love with her anyways, and as he carts her coffin away to do God knows what with it, the piece of poisonous apple falls out of her throat and she awakens, and as a punishment for her deeds, the evil queen is forced to wear a pair of glowing hot iron shoes placed before her with tongs and dance in them until she drops dead. Lovely stuff. Coming in at number 2, The Little Mermaid. Released in 1989, The Little Mermaid tells the story of Ariel, a young princess who makes a deal with a sea witch, allowing her to meet Eric, the human prince she loves. However, in the original version by Hans Christian Andersen, things aren't quite as cheery. Though the deal with the sea witch does still occur, the penalty for failure isn't just turning back into a mermaid. Instead, it's death. Isn't it always? Yeah, not so kid friendly now, is it? Every step Ariel takes makes her feel like she's walking on daggers, but she still dances for the prince and soon becomes his companion. However, there is no happily ever after because the prince ends up marrying another girl who he mistakenly believes was the one to save him from the shipwreck. Before the mermaid faces death, her sisters sell their hair to bring her dagger. If she kills the prince, his dripping blood will cause her feet to become fins again. However, in the end she can't do it, and so she jumps off the ship where the wedding was held and ends up turning into sea foam. Disturbing as hell, I know. And finally, coming in at number 1, Sleeping Beauty. We all know the story of Sleeping Beauty. A young princess is cursed to sleep until her true love wakes her with a kiss. Now, the Disney movie itself is pretty dark. There are spindles and even an evil witch who can turn into a dragon. However, the original story is very different and far more horrific. The original story was written by an Italian author named Giambattista Basile, who published a book called The Tale of Tales in 1634. It contained 50 different stories, including an early version of Rapunzel, Cinderella, Snow White, as well as Sleeping Beauty, which was actually called Sun, Moon and Talia. Now, as we know, in the Disney version, Princess Aurora is swept off her feet by the prince. However, in the original story, the princess is not swept off her feet, she's actually raped in her sleep. The two main characters don't even meet until Sleeping Beauty is already asleep. Crazy, I know. In the original version, a king finds an abandoned palace. He then sneaks through the window using a ladder and searches every room until he finds Sleeping Beauty, named Talia, who was lying on a bed, deeply sleeping. I quote, "Crying aloud, the king beheld her charms and felt his blood course hotly through his veins. He lifted her in his arms and carried her to bed, where he gathered the first fruits of love, aka he raped her." Hold on though, it gets worse. After he does this, the king goes home and thought nothing of it. Sleeping Beauty wakes up when the fairies place the twins on the sleeping woman's breast so they can nurse. Yeah, she gave birth to the king's twins while she was asleep. Now in the Disney version, Maleficent is the self-proclaimed mistress of evil and curses baby Aurora with the threat of a spindle. However, in the original story, she is the king's wife, a woman married to a cheating rapist. And after she finds out he cheated, she turns vicious and threatens a secretary to reveal the secret of the king's mistress, warning him, "If you hide the truth from me, you will never be found again, dead or alive." He of course tells the queen everything, and in turn the queen tricks Sleeping Beauty into sending her children to the queen. And this is where gets really dark. The queen then orders the cook to slaughter the children and cook them up in several tasty dishes for her wretched husband. The cook couldn't go through with it though, so she instead hides the twins and cooks lamb in their place. Let's skip over the end. The queen is eventually thrown into a fire by the king and Sleeping Beauty are finally reunited with no harm to their children. They get married and live happily ever after. Dumb. Well, there we have it. Do you guys agree with our list? Were there any Disney stories that we missed? Leave us all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below, and perhaps we can do a part 2. Before we go though, I just want to respond to a few comments from one of our last videos, top 5 scariest SCP monsters that should stay locked up. Jason Hankard said, "My new life goal is to become Lucy's hypnosis test subject." Don't say such things out loud, they will come true. Never say never. Icarus the Fox Kid said, "Lucy, SCP-5578, the Queen, total control over all darkness." Facts. Someone needs to write that SCP article immediately. Betsy Maldonado said, "Can I get a shout out and love anything horror?" Here's your shout out. Thanks for watching. Rugged Walnut said, "Lucy is SCP-000. The truth must be revealed. Come and claim your crown, our Dark Queen. Willingly, my loyal followers, Lucifers." And on that note, if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another scary vid. And until next time, see you later. It's gonna get spooky, Chris, so cover your ears if you have to. Who published a book called The Tale of Tales. Original. Well done. The Story of Stories. Chris! Chris! Okay. That was bad, I felt that. Well, there we have it. Do you guys agree? That's terrible. Wow. Unforgivable.